Michael Jackson was not a superstar, he was a victim. Beyond the mansions, the international fame, the millions of dollars, and the tours, he was a broken man. His life was marked by emotional problems, cruelty, and, above all, a lot of loneliness. If you thought Jackson had been someone with an enviable life and a few problems, you were wrong. After listening to his story in detail, you might change your mind about him, as I won't talk so much about records and tours, but about his personal life and his dark thoughts. From his abusive father to the affair with the children, and the day he left this world. It is August 1958, in a small industrial town called Gary, Indiana, where a child is born who will change the world of entertainment forever. His parents are lower class. Joseph Jackson, along with his wife Catherine, have 3 daughters and 5 sons. His mother is loving, but his father is a very disciplined and strict man, very strict, and is always looking to improve the family's quality of life. However, the things his father is about to do to improve the family's finances will have serious consequences for little Michael's mental health. Joseph realizes that his children have dancing and singing abilities from a young age, so he decides to create a family group that Michael Jackson joins when he is 6 years old. Their father quickly adopts the role of manager and demands that they work hard, because he knows that the boys have the potential to excel in the artistic world. Soon after, the Jackson 5 won a talent contest. After this, they start touring small bars, local auditoriums, school dances, and nightclubs. In 1967, Joe professionalizes the band by signing their first record deal. The group's success grows, and so does their recognition. However, behind all this lies a sad reality. Remember I told you that Joe was a strict but violent father? He would yell at them and beat them during rehearsals so that everything would go perfectly. He would sit in a chair in front of them with a belt in his hand to watch them closely. When Michael grew up, he stated the following in an interview. He would watch us rehearse, and if we didn't get it right, he would tear us apart. He had a belt in his hand, and if he didn't, he'd rip you apart and you'd get it wrong. We weren't just rehearsing, we were nervous too. Years later, in an interview with Oprah, Michael stated the following. He was very strict and very tough. With his look he would scare you. Sometimes he would come to see me and I was so scared that I wanted to throw up. Things got better and better for the Jackson 5. However, the one who stood out the most for his talent for dancing and, above all, for his incredible voice was Michael, who for his young age was already considered a promise in the music world. The Jackson 5 first appeared on television in 1969, in a contest called Miss Black America, which was followed by hundreds of thousands of people, giving them even more exposure and recognition. Many interviews focused almost exclusively on little Michael, and major magazines such as the Rolling Stone declared him a prodigy. But that same year, when Michael was just 11 years old, the group released the song, I Want You Back, which became a smash hit. So much so that it quickly became the most popular song in the United States. In this song, Michael is the lead vocalist, so most of the attention is focused on him. This fact is very important because little by little he is heading towards his solo career, and that's exactly how it was. At the same time he is working with his brothers, Michael starts his solo career, and with each album he releases, he is getting a little bit better. Little by little he is getting ready to create the album that will mark a before and after in his solo career. The famous album The Wall. So far, everyone sees the group and Michael as superstars, but behind the show is a boy who lost something very important. So far, all his work success has come at the cost of a lot of hard work and, above all, his childhood. To give you an idea of the amount of work he had done up to that point. Michael Jackson, at the age of 20, had released 14 albums with the Jackson 5 and another 4 solo albums. In total, 18 albums, but keep in mind that he started when he was 6 years old, so Michael was releasing more than 1 album per year. And all this while doing live shows, tours, concerts, TV appearances, rehearsals, studio recordings, and interviews. All this stress and workload is taking its toll on his psychological health. In fact, Michael himself, many years later, stated in a speech the following, "My childhood was completely taken away. There were no birthdays or Christmas. There were never the pleasures of a normal childhood. These were replaced by hard work, struggle, and pain in exchange for material things and professional success. The success of the Jackson Five was such that they moved to a much larger house in Encino, California. They went from 11 people living in a two-room house to practically living in a mansion. Little Michael grew both physically and professionally. No longer a child making children's music, he is now a teen idol. He released his 3 solo albums until finally, in 1973, he released the album. This album would mark a before and after in his career, the album Of the Wall. It quickly became a resounding commercial success, with hits like Rock With You and Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, which made Michael Jackson the winner of his first Grammy. This album became the first in history to spawn 4 singles that reached #1 on the charts. Things were going well, but they were about to go even better. However, here came a new problem in the boy's life: plastic surgeries. In 1979, while Michael was having a dance rehearsal, he fell and broke his nose, necessitating surgery. The first surgery was initially presented as a medical necessity to help correct a breathing problem that had been complicated by the fracture, but there was also an aesthetic change. It was a process called alarplasia, which, as we can see, narrows the base of the nose. It is possible that Michael resorted to these surgeries for various reasons, but here is a rather sad possibility. In an interview with Oprah, Michael stated that his father teased him by saying he had a fat nose and was an ugly boy. This is crucial to understanding this part of his life, as it is possible that Michael suffered from body dysmorphia. This is not completely proven, but there are several factors that can help us deduce this. This disorder is a mental health problem in which a person is obsessively preoccupied with what they perceive as flaws in their appearance, even though these sometimes don't even exist. As we saw, Michael grew up in a home where his father abused him both physically and verbally, and his constant criticism of him for physical aspects such as his nose or appearance may have sown the seeds of a negative body image, even more so coming from parental figures who are fundamental to the development of self-esteem and self-perception. Body dysmorphia not only affects one's perception of self, but can also lead to detrimental behaviors such as multiple risky plastic surgeries and anxiety, depression, and, in extreme cases, self-destruction. His life and multiple plastic surgeries suggest a struggle with self-image. Michael Jackson's case shows us how childhood wounds can manifest in deeply disturbing ways in adulthood. In 1982, Jackson released the album that changed everything, Thriller, which quickly shook the world and became the best-selling album in history. In February 1984, it won a record-setting 8 Grammy Awards. The songs Beat It, Billie Jean, and Thriller are immensely popular, with more than 66 million copies sold worldwide, and some estimates suggest the number is much higher. Thriller is the best-selling album of all time, so much so that it managed to stay on the Billboard 200 chart for several years and spent a record 37 weeks at the top spot. Thriller's memorable video revolutionized the way music videos were made and perceived, and won the first MTV Video Music Award in 1984, later renamed the Michael Jackson Video Music Award in his honor. But Michael didn't keep it all to himself. He also began to support many charitable causes. In 1985, he participated in We Are the World, a charity song that raised more than $60 million for humanitarian aid in Africa. The song was written by Michael Jackson. Lionel Richie produced it and brought together a variety of famous artists of the time in an unprecedented collaborative event. In this decade, Jackson first performed the famous moonwalk dance step, which made him appear to walk backwards effortlessly. This step had already been performed by other artists, but it was Michael who popularized it and incorporated it as his signature dance pass. Michael Jackson was on top of the world, but during the heyday of Thriller, a tragic event occurred that significantly and negatively impacted Michael's life. On January 27, 1984, Michael Jackson was signing a Pepsi commercial in Los Angeles, but while the commercial was being shot, something went terribly wrong with the pyrotechnic effects and his head was set on fire. Everyone rushes to help him, But the damage is done. The fire causes second and third-degree burns to the top of his head. He is rushed to the hospital where he is quickly treated. The burns are brief and require immediate treatment, which later turns into surgery to implant skin grafts in the scalp. Obviously, Michael sued Pepsi and won the lawsuit, for which he received a settlement of $1.5 million, which he donated to the Broadman Medical Center. However, in addition to the physical damage, the mishap also had a significant emotional and psychological impact on Jackson, who was already very self-conscious about his appearance due to years of public scrutiny, criticism for his remarkable physical changes, and the trauma left by psychological abuse from his father since he was a child. The accident only exacerbated all those feelings. But that's not the worst of it. Chronic pain from the accident and surgeries caused Michael to start taking a lot of painkillers. In 1987, Michael released the album Bad, with which he reached the peak of his popularity, but also marked the beginning of his personal decline. This album sold around 35 million copies worldwide and received multiple platinum albums in several countries. Bad produced a string of hits that reached the top 10 of the Billboard charts, including Bad, The Way You Make Me Feel, Man in the Mirror, Another Part of Me, and Smooth Criminal, among others. With the release of the album, the Bad World Tour began, which started on September 12, 1987 in Tokyo and ended on January 27, 1989 in Los Angeles. It lasted 2 years and 4 months and went through more than 40 cities. The tour brought more than 4 million fans in approximately 123 concerts, and it is estimated that the Bad World Tour made more than $160 million, making it one of the highest-grossing tours of all time. He also bought his ranch for $18 million, located in California and with an area of 1,000 acres, which he called Neverland, and which he inaugurated in 1989. In this place there was, among other things, a movie theater, a zoo, a theme park, a carousel, a long railroad, and a roller coaster. All these facilities were acquired by Jackson to entertain the many terminally ill children who received Neverland from Jackson, to whom he had always provided altruistic help. In his eagerness to stay close to his childhood, the name of this place refers to Peter Pan's Neverland, where children just have fun and never grow up. Both the album and the tour I talked about a minute ago were not only monumental in terms of commercial and critical success, but also marked a shift in the way the world viewed Michael Jackson. During that period, he became a global icon, gaining an unprecedented amount of fame and recognition. At that time, he also publishes his autobiography, Moonwalk, in which he gives the world a detailed look at his life and career, becoming a bestseller. In it, Jackson writes, "I am the loneliest person in the world." The singer describes loneliness as one of the most difficult facets of his life and fame, an isolation he felt despite, or perhaps because of, his worldwide fame. He has achieved such a level of success that his identity as an individual has blurred in the shadow of his own myth. Being the king of pop was a title that granted him massive admiration, but at the same time created an almost insurmountable barrier between him and the rest of humanity. But even worse, because of his enormous success, people no longer saw Jackson as a human being, but as an opportunity. $1 million contract for a producer or an opportunity for fame for an emerging musician. Perhaps Jackson may have felt that his humanity had become a bargaining chip, leaving aside his feelings, desires, and emotions, transforming him into a mere object. Paradoxically, he is surrounded by millions of fans and an environment that constantly wants something from him, which could have led him to extreme loneliness. In 1991, he releases the album Dangerous, which quickly becomes a commercial and critical success. Singles such as Black or White and Remember the Time topped the charts. The following year, he goes on a world tour called the Dangerous World Tour, which is a huge success and further solidifies Jackson's status as a global superstar. He later achieves another hit. In his career as an entertainer, in 1993 he revolutionized the Super Bowl halftime shows with his appearance on the show. However, in August 1993, all hell broke loose. The Los Angeles police launched an investigation after Jordan Chandler, a 13-year-old boy, and his father, Evan Chandler, accused Jackson of inappropriate behavior, creating a media hell for the entertainer. Subsequently, Jackson's home at Neverland Ranch is searched by police, but authorities find no conclusive evidence. Michael Jackson is on an international tour at the time, and news of the raid sends shock waves through the entertainment world. However, for months later, Michael Jackson is subjected to a strip search and authorities take photos of his private parts. These photographs are used to compare with descriptions given by Jordan Chandler. It became a significant source of humiliation and stress for Jackson, and received extensive media coverage. Added to this was the criticism and comments from literally everyone, which resulted in severe periods of stress for Michael, which gradually began to affect his mental health, causing problems such as depression and insomnia. It is very possible that this kind of situations made Michael take refuge in the consumption of drugs, and that, in order to fight his insomnia, he started to use medications such as Valium. In January 1994, Michael Jackson and his attorneys reached a civil settlement, although the criminal investigation was still ongoing. Jackson and the Chandlers settled out of court. The amount was reported to be between $15 million and $25 million. It is important to mention that Michael Jackson always proclaimed his innocence. His legal team argued that the settlement was not an admission of guilt and had been made to allow Jackson to move on with his life at the time. Jackson had first married Lisa Marie Presley, daughter of Elvis Presley. In an interview, Lisa Marie mentioned that Jackson had approached her at a time when they were both going through difficult times. She was in the middle of a divorce, and he was being accused of child molestation. Many in the media and the general public speculated that the marriage was a public relations stunt, especially given the allegations involving minors that Jackson was facing at the time. This marriage lasted less than 2 years, as they ended up divorcing. Presley has mentioned in interviews that one of the reasons for their divorce was Jackson's struggle with prescription drug dependency, something she tried unsuccessfully to help him overcome. In November 1996, he remarried again to Deborah Jean Rowe. She gave birth to their first son, Michael Joseph Jackson Jr., commonly known as Prince, and also their second daughter, Paris Michael Catherine Jackson. Although Rowe has stated that she loved Jackson, their marriage has been described as more transactional than romantic. Rowe and Jackson did not live together conventionally, and she has noted in interviews that her primary role was to provide him with children. Michael was such a media figure that he was unable to have any formal relationship. Without the media and people stepping in to judge their actions, this marriage didn't last long either. They divorced just 3 years later, and Rose was left with full custody of the children. The clearest proof of Jackson's children has been the subject of much criticism and controversy. Some people even questioned whether Jackson was the biological father of his children. By those years, Michael's dependence on drugs was increasing, but a terrible event aggravated it even more in 1999, while he was performing a series of concerts. The platform that supported him failed, and, instead of making a smooth descent, it went down with great speed, hurting the artist's spine, who at that moment gave his best. In order to continue singing, but already behind the stage, he collapsed. This blow caused him permanent injuries, but above all, a lot of back pain. Obviously, this pain was solved with more painkillers. Michael Jackson was already dependent on these substances before. However, this accident aggravated the situation even more. By the time of the 2000s, Jackson's popularity was still massive, but a decline was already in sight. In 2003, a documentary aired that put Jackson back in the spotlight. This time it was much worse. The documentary is titled Living with Michael Jackson, and in it British journalist Martin Bashir interviews and lives with the singer for 8 months. This report was too controversial, as Michael openly stated that he slept with children. Bashir repeatedly asked him why he invited children into his room, and Jackson defended himself by stating that such activity is natural. Jackson adamantly denied any carnal motivation, and the media took him to task for these claims, and public opinion changed dramatically. Michael Jackson felt betrayed by Martin Bashir and complained that the film gave a distorted picture of his behavior. He said that in the final version of the interview, Bashir only used material that supported Bashir's negative view of Jackson. But why did Jackson like to be around kids? Well, Michael not only liked to be around them, he liked to be like them. In many videos you can see that he has behaviors of much younger people, something he did in order to be around minors. Or is there something deeper behind it? Showing this type of behavior by an adult could be considered a form of regression. In psychological terms, it is a defense mechanism first identified by Sigmund Freud that leads a person to revert to an earlier developmental state to avoid dealing with current stress or emotional trauma. In fact, Jackson is not the only case on record. There are other examples in the art world who faced fame, success, or simply extreme life circumstances in their youth and seem not to have dealt with emotional or behavioral problems in adulthood. For example, Britney Spears or Judy Garland. Regression can manifest itself in different ways, but in Michael's case it manifested itself in behaviors, attitudes, and activities associated with childhood. Recalling an earlier period in his life. By returning to an earlier state of development, the person may feel a sense of security or comfort. Taking all of the above into account, it is possible that Jackson liked being around them because they helped him return to the childhood he never had, but also because the children wanted nothing from him. The kids are not interested in record deals, media exclusives, or business partnerships. They simply exist in the moment. They might have offered him one of the few authentic interactions in his life. In January 2004, just after the release of the documentary, Jackson was formally charged with 7 counts of sexual abuse and also with supplying alcohol to a minor for the purpose of molesting him. The trial began in the Superior Court of Santa Barbara County, California, in 2005. The case received global media coverage. During the trial, the prosecution presented a number of witnesses, including former employees of Neverland, as well as other children who had spent time with Jackson. The defense presented other witnesses. It argued that the allegations were an attempt to get money from Michael. During the trial, Jackson's physical and mental health was affected. His body and face were completely changed by his remarkable weight loss. Finally, and after 14 weeks of trials, Jackson was acquitted of all charges. But his public image suffered considerable damage, and he spent the following years away from the public eye, facing financial problems. In March 2009, Michael Jackson announced at a press conference in London that he was going to perform a series of concerts entitled This Is It, organized by EMI Music. After that, rehearsals began. Although there are rumors that his health was in a worrying state, the use of medication was part of his daily life. In particular, he took a drug called propofol, a sedative commonly used in hospital settings to sedate patients during surgeries and other medical procedures. However, Michael used it to help him sleep. It was so common for him that he referred to it as my milk, due to the white color of the substance. Michael had been away from the stage for a long time, so he had lost his physical condition. He had gone almost 10 years without exerting himself on the scale, and overnight he was going to have to rehearse for long hours, have meetings and talk to producers from dawn to dusk, all with chronic back pain and insomnia. In order to complete the tour, Michael requires a personal physician in his contract with EAG to assist him throughout the tour. That doctor is Dr. Murray, who already knew Michael and knew exactly what he needed. So after rehearsals, when Michael couldn't sleep, Murray administered propofol so Jackson could fall asleep and perform well in rehearsals the next day. But one bad day, Dr. Murray made a serious mistake. June 2009. It was a day like any other. Dr. Murray gave Michael doses of propofol to help him sleep, but this time Jackson's body reacted differently. It went from moderate to deep sedation, which caused his body to stop breathing, and he died of respiratory failure. When paramedics arrived, they tried unsuccessfully to revive him, and hours later, he was pronounced dead. Many people in his close circle said no, but yes. They were so aware of his drug dependence and abuse that they could have helped him by sending him to rehab. However, that meant giving up work, giving up shows, and therefore giving up making money, so the partners and contractors, instead of intervening when his relationship with the drugs became dangerous, chose to close their eyes and let Michael continue abusing these substances as it was more profitable. This is not a happy story. Michael was treated as a means to an end from his earliest childhood until his last days. Here is a man who transcended borders, broke records, and entertained millions, but at the same time lived in an emotional and social prison. His story began with a childhood that was overshadowed by work, as from an early age his father and other adults dragged him into show business, teaching him from then on that his value lay in his ability to perform, in being a profitable commodity, rather than in his simple existence as a human being. As he grew older, that scrutiny intensified to unimaginable levels. Depression and anxiety are not surprising when every aspect of your life is publicly scrutinized and judged. The media, far from being impartial observers, often became accusers, compounding your already fragile emotional state. The most painful part of Michael's story is perhaps the pervasive loneliness, chasing him in a world that valued him more for what he could offer than for who he was. Authentic human connection became a rarity, almost a luxury. People who might have offered him support and friendship often approached him with an agenda, seeing him as a means to something else, rather than valuing him as an end in himself.